Hello everyone, this is Anugrah Rao. Welcome to the episode 52 of Microsoft RF Code, brought to you by Millionlights. Millionlights is a TV channel dedicated to improving skills of people and their employability. Now, let me tell you more about Microsoft RF Code. Microsoft RF Code is a series of lectures, courses, and talks by experts who are going to discuss the latest Microsoft technologies, topics related to programming, and industry forecasts that are all focused on employability. This course is basically for people pursuing computer science. This content has been created by our partner Microsoft. And today we have Christopher Harrison and Gabrielle with us who will teach you everything you need to upgrade your skills. Now let's move towards the course. In the previous episode, we covered web workers. In this episode, we will cover the remaining part of web workers, and then we will move towards server communications, in which we will learn ways to communication with the server from the browser. Explore two of them using the XML HTTP request object and jQuery AJAX calls. So let's get started.
The next real quick thing, kind of moving on from here, is the ability to do messaging. So one of the catches with my worker is that the script is going to execute immediately upon load. Well, if you want to be able to do some form of like a stop and a start for any setup work or any cleanup work, that's going to be on your own. You're going to have to go in and do that. And so one very simple way that you could do that would be just to add on a little, stop and start status. So what I could actually do here, after I set everything up inside of my little script, if I wanted to set up start, is I could just simply say worker.postMessage, and then let's just do status equals start, just like that. And so now let's come on over to our worker here. And now let's detect a start message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my message object. We'll put that right up at the very top. And then I'm going to say if message object dot message equals start. And did I call it status or did I call it start? I called it status. I'm glad I looked. I have a great memory. It's just really short. There we go. There we go. We'll just move that around. OK, cool. So what you're going to notice here is that, again, there's no start-stop event system here. It's up to you to add that in. And so that's exactly what I'm doing here is I'm just adding in my own start. Now, the other very big thing that you might be noticing here is I'm using 3 equal signs. One of the biggest issues that we have with JavaScript is the fact that it's weakly typed, which means, of course, that our data types could just change on the fly. And one of the things that you might have noticed from one of Gabby's earlier demos is she did string concatenation just throwing in integers. Because what JavaScript is going to do is it's going to go, oh, all right, well, I've got a string here, I've got an integer here. You probably wanted that as a string, so it will automatically do conversions. That can cause bugs. So if you want to ensure that not only is it equal to the value, but it's also the same type, you use the triple equal. So that's going to ensure that it's specifically a string there, and in my case, it's going to be start. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to say self post message, and I'm going to say started. Now, what I could do on the other side, if I wanted to, is I could retrieve that message and say, oh, OK, well, if it started, then I want to do something else, like maybe I want to light the button up or something like that. So I could go in and implement that. But I think you kind of see where all of this is going. So now if I come back over here to my page, I hit refresh, you're going to notice that I now get started. And then you'll also notice that if I lob my test message on over, that I'm going to get back that processed. Cool. All right. So if you want, and we're just not going to have time to walk through the demo step by step here, but you'll actually notice that if you take a look at the GitHub repository, and I'll throw that up onto the screen in a moment here, but if you take a look at the GitHub repository, one of the things that you would notice is I've got the pre-canned demos there, and you'll notice that I've got a full setup here for our stopped and our started. So you're going to notice that I'm going to detect if it's start, do whatever it is that we want. If we notice that you said stop, do a stopped right here. And then you'll also notice that we're going to just send the object back over. And then if I took a look at this, you'll notice that we've got the full setup here, fully commented as well, for detecting the fact that it was started, detecting the fact that it was stopped, and then processing, in this simple little example, a name here. So I've got all of that set up inside of there. So you could go back and take a look. Okay. Yeah.
Really quick, and if whenever you're open for questions.
Yeah.
So really interesting question was, trying to find it. I just had it.
That's okay. Take your time. It'll give me an opportunity to have a sip of water.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so are you able to use any library like jQuery inside the worker script?
So the question is, are you able to use a library inside the worker script? And in particular, jQuery was mentioned. But the answer to jQuery is explicitly no. And the reason for that is jQuery needs the DOM in order to do its work, and it's not going to have access to that. So the answer to that straight up is going to be no. As far as other libraries go, it's going to really just depend on what that library is and what that library does. So maybe. I will... We'll take a look a little bit later for an article that will explicitly lay out the objects that you can and can't access with through the worker.
And then one other question was, are you able to prioritize the worker thread?
No. So this is why I always like to put air quotes, and I don't like using air quotes, but it's the only way to do it. This is why I always put air quotes around threading, because it's a simulated threading environment. You don't get any control over it. So as far as things like process or priority or otherwise, you don't have the ability to do that. So cool. You can always just interrupt me, by the way.
Oh, I don't want. I feel like it was rude. I wasn't sure.
Just throw something at me. It's fine.
Okay.
All right. Now, here's the small problem with using our workers. Is in order to use a worker, you need to know that you're about to use a worker. That's not really a good thing. That whenever I'm writing some code and I'm going to get something else to manage this for me, I really don't care what the other end is doing behind the scenes. I mean, if it's, I don't know, going off and making a call to a server, or if it's using web workers or whatever it is, I really don't care, and I shouldn't care. I really should just be able to treat it like a black box, that I just simply say, hey, go do some work, and I get a response back. Okay, that's cool. But we need then some ability to hide what it is that we're doing. That what I want, the goal here, what I want is I want to be able to say, all right, go do this. And when you're done doing that, let me know, because I need to do something at that point. And this is where promises and deferred come into play through jQuery. We're going to start off with deferred, and then we're going to take a look at promises. What deferred will allow you to do is it will allow you to set up a middleman object. So that I call into this middleman object, it's going to do some magic, and it's going to let me know once it's completed, so then that way I can go ahead and run my code. That's what deferred is all about. So we can create our own long-running operations and allow developers to just simply register an event handler. And what's great about that is we can do whatever we want. So if we're going to use a web worker to start, we can use a web worker. If we're going to maybe later offload this and call off to a server, well, we can do that. So it really is up to us to decide how it is that we want to do it and be able to change it. The deferred object gives us that ability to be able to manage all of that and then raise events when it completes, when it fails, or also even progress. So if you want to set up a progress bar, you could do that with deferred. The basic pattern when you're going to use deferred is as follows. Number one is set up a deferred object, just like that. Number two is to then start whatever the operation is. So if you're going to call off to a server, you're going to set up your web worker, whatever it is, you're going to do that at this point. And then you're going to return back a promise. And it's that promise that the caller or the client is going to use. And the way that you're going to let the caller or the client know that something has happened is by calling resolve, if everything completed successfully, or, in case of a failure, calling reject. So resolve if it succeeded, or reject if it failed. Okay, let's go in and take a look at a demo here. And I'm actually just going to sort of skip to the end here and open up the existing code, just because there's going to be a fair amount of it. So I think it's going to be a bit easier if we walk through everything sort of step by step. So let me start with the worker here. So this is going to be my very simple little worker script. So what you're going to notice is, just like before, self on message. So, hey, we received a message. There we go. And then what you're going to notice is we're going to grab whatever the start time is, just for update purposes later, and then we're going to simulate a long-running operation. And so rather than writing a whole bunch of JavaScript to actually do a long-running operation, I'm going to do what everybody else does, which is just to go ahead and put in some form of a sleep mechanism here. Which, by the way, if you're a contractor, this is a great way to get yourself some additional work. Just occasionally sneak in a little sleep statement. The client calls you up and says, hey, this is running really slowly. Just go back to your code, remove the sleep statement, and hey, look, it's running that much faster. Don't do that. It's a joke. I'm kidding. All right. In any event, so I've got the simulation of a sleep. You are going to notice that out of the box, JavaScript doesn't actually have a sleep. So there's the little function there that's just going to loop on time. And that's all that I'm doing right down below there. So we're going to simulate the sleep. We're going to build up the return message, where we're also going to append out the start time. And then, of course, we're going to send the message back to the caller. So all of that is what we've already seen here. So we already know that. The next little script that we're going to open up here is my little client. And so this is going to be a function called process message. And what I want to highlight here is, there we go, is this part right here. Save for the little line in the middle. Save for that little line in the middle. Everything else is identical. We've already seen this. That what you're going to notice right here is we're going to create a brand new worker. What you're going to notice right here is we're going to receive a message back. And then what you're going to notice right here is we're going to send a message to the worker. We've already seen that. There's nothing that's new there. But what we want to do is we want to abstract that away from the caller. We don't want the caller to know what we're doing. All that the caller should know is that this is going to take a little while. So the way that we do that is by first setting up our deferred object. So just var deferred equals $.deferred. And again, this is a jQuery thing. So that's coming from jQuery. Generally speaking, I don't want to say always because that's not the case, but generally speaking, if you see a $sign, that's going to be jQuery, generally speaking. All right, so we've got our deferred. Then what we're going to do is when we receive the message back, we know that it's going to be inside of e.data, and it's, in this case, going to be a message property, so we're just going to pull that right off of there. What we're going to do is rather than updating the UI like we did before, we're going to call this little resolve method. And what that's going to do is that's going to alert anyone who's using the promise object that the operation has completed successfully. So now they'll know, oh, okay, cool, this is done. And they'll also have access to the data that we send in. And then down at the very bottom here, what you're going to notice is we're just going to return the promise back to the caller. So the caller just gets the promise. So they don't know what we're doing behind the scenes. They just simply know that something's going to take a little while. And that's it. So if we now take a look at our promises, kind of go back to our slides, this is going to be the caller side. So again, certain operations can take some unknown amount of time. Asynchronous programming allows us to go ahead and spin that off. And the jQuery promise is going to be an implementation of what's known as the promise pattern. And the promise pattern basically just simply says, hey, look, here's a token. Once this is done, I'm going to let you know via this token. I promise you that. That's what this is. And so it gives us the ability to set up event handlers for if it fails, if it succeeds, or if it's, still running. So if you want to set up a little progress bar, you have the ability to go in and do that. Now, the 3 events in question here are done, which is going to let us know that it completed successfully, fail, which is going to let us know that it was unsuccessful, and then finally progress, which is going to let us know, hey, there's been some form of a progress update. The one that we're typically going to be interested in is done. I also want to mention, however, that off of a jQuery promise, there's a then method as well. And the way that the then method works is it actually takes 3 parameters that are in order: done, fail, and progress. So that way you can just do them all in one fell swoop there. Okay, so now let's take a look at our promises and close this entire thing out. So here's my little bit of HTML. And so what you're going to notice is that I've got my basic little UI. We're going to have a message. We're going to have an input box. And we're going to have a little button. And then we're going to have our results and our result list down below. And then what you're going to notice is that I'm loading up my jQuery. And I'm loading up that little client script that we showed a minute ago. Now, here's the great part, is that my code here does not need to know what we're doing. It doesn't need to know that we're using a worker process. All that it needs to know is that we're going to call that little function that I created called process message, and that it's going to give me back a promise. And that I can use that promise to say, okay, when we're done, let's do something. And so you'll notice that when we're done, I'm going to create a little function right there. And we're going to get in our data. And unlike when we're using our worker, it's not going to be inside of a little data property. It's just going to be the data itself. And then we're just going to append this out. And what's great about this, first of all, is that when I'm calling this, this is much simpler. That I'm not having to load up a worker script or anything like that. That I'm just simply calling this function, and I'm just simply saying, hey, look, when you're done, just let me know. That's it. And I could even actually have sort of simplified things potentially a little bit, is that I could just have said process message dot done, and then put it all together like that. Just really streamline it there. That call the method, hey, when you're done, just give me the data back, and then I'll go ahead and take care of the UI from there. The other great advantage here is, let's say that later on, we want to be able to call off to a server rather than using a worker. I can do that, and nobody has to be any the wiser. As long as I'm just returning back a promise object, the caller does not care. Cool. So now let me go ahead and run this. And here's my little message. And I'm just going to say message 1, and we'll hit send message. Did I not undo enough? I didn't undo enough. There we go. Okay. Take 2. There we go. We'll go in and say message 1, and then we'll hit send, and then message 2, and then we'll hit send. And you know what? I'm just going to send message 2 like a couple of times here. I clicked that 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. So you'll notice that, first of all, I'm able, through that little promise, to just be able to say, hey, look, when you're done, just let me know. But the other very big thing here is you'll notice that I'm able to just kind of keep clicking on that little button. There's my worker. I'm going to sleep this for 5 seconds here, just to give myself a little bit of extra time. Okay, you know what? There we go. Message. So I'm just going to, click, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to click. And what you'll notice here is that, it's just going to keep spinning off the appropriate thread. It's going to keep doing its work behind the scenes. And, from the client perspective, I obviously don't know exactly what's going on, that I just simply say, hey, here's a message, and it will come back to me. And then I've also got my threading here. So I've got my threading through the workers. I've also have the ability to abstract all of that away and make my life a little bit easier by utilizing those promises.
Okay, so I guess a quick question. What happens, I'm just reading the question from the Q&A.
And I'm going to get a drink of water.
In the case of the worker finishing the work so quickly that it's done before, wait, sorry, I read that wrong. What if in some case the worker finishes the work so quickly before the done function calls finishes?
So if it turned out that the worker was just like instantaneous, one of the things that the browser is going to do is it's going to still, it's basically going to synchronize everything for you. So for example, let me do this real quick. Let me, I'm going to open up my, let's open up my demo. Okay. Yeah, so let's do this. Let's say that I did something like this, that inside of my worker, I just immediately sent right back a message that I just simply said, hello. That just immediately I went ahead and did that. Well, if you take a look at the HTML, what you're going to notice here is that we're going to create the worker, and then we're going to go ahead and add on an on message. And that could pose a little bit of a problem here, because I can pretty much guarantee you that it's going to try and post that message before it's done setting up the event handler. So the question then becomes, okay, well, what's going to wind up happening? One of the things that that the browser will do is it will help synchronize everything for you in that type of a case. So basically, the message will go into like your voicemail, if you will, and wait for the on-message event to actually be wired up, and then make sure that that event actually does get bubbled up properly. So if it did turn out that I called off and it was just immediate, the browser is going to make sure that everything is still synchronized properly and everything still flows through properly.
Awesome.
And another question or no?
Nope, that's all we got. Wait. What font size are you using in Visual Studio?
16?
16.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a problem. And another question was asked how many modules were left. We have 2.
We have 2. We have 2. Yep. We are going to eat first, though.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to do that. So we're going to break for about an hour, and we're going to grab some food, and you're more than welcome to grab some food. Say again? We'll be back. We're going to be back around 1, I've been told. Our time. So Pacific time will be back around 1. I believe that would be...
we're just getting all these questions.
Yeah, I think that's noon Hawaii time. I don't know. In any event, we're going to be back at about 1. Yeah, we will see you then.
Yeah, and I guess you can keep asking questions in the Q&A. We're just going to be off screen, but we'll be sure to get to your questions as soon as possible.
There you have it. All right, we'll see you back in about 1 Pacific Daylight Time.
Bye.
Welcome back, welcome back. This is JavaScript for experienced developers. That's Gabby. I'm Christopher. And we left off in the last module seeing how we could introduce quote-unquote threading into our application. Now we want to take a look at another very common operation that you're going to want to be able to perform, which is calling other servers from a web page. And so we're going to do this actually in kind of 4 ways. That we're going to start off by just doing it with just the bare bones object, which is the XML HTTP request object. We're then going to take a step up and take a look at AJAX, in particular inside of jQuery. And then we're going to see how we can do 2-way communication by utilizing WebSockets, and then close the whole thing off by taking a look at ASP.NET's SignalR. So first up, let's talk a little bit about XML HTTP request. So here's the thing. When you're creating a web page, one of the big things that you want is you want to make sure that it's interactive, so that you could actually call out to the server and get some data back from the server. That, in a perfect world, the web page that you would create would behave an awful lot like a locally installed application. Of course, the catch we're going to wind up running into is a lot of the data that we're going to need is going to be inside of a database or on another server somewhere. So how do we go about calling that? Well, that's where the XML HTTP request object comes into play. Now, this object has actually been around for quite a while. It actually came to be in 1999. It was originally created by Microsoft to support Outlook web access. And then Mozilla went in and created their implementation, which eventually just became the de facto standard. And pretty much every browser that's out there, even going all the way back to like IE6, is going to have support for XML HTTP request. Now, the big thing that I want to mention about this object, and we'll dig deeper into it in the next section, is the fact that this is very low level. So that you're going to be able to send a message, you're going to be able to get data back, and you're going to get complete control over that. But unfortunately, it can be a little bit more complex than maybe you actually want if you're just looking to real quick grab a little bit of data from the server. And this is where AJAX will come into play, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So what you're going to notice here is I have the very basic little call here inside of code, and you're going to notice that I'm going to new up the XML HTTP request object. Apparently, I'm not going to be able to draw on my screen. Let's try it with that. Let's see if that works. Okay, that sort of works. In any event, so you're going to notice that we've got the call to new up that XML HTTP request object. Now, like I mentioned before, this is very low level. And it's also by default asynchronous. So it's not actually using a web worker, but it is doing its call asynchronously. By default. You can actually change that. I don't recommend it, but you can actually change that. So as a result, when we get the value back, we don't know when we're going to get that value back. And so we'll need to detect that. And the way that we detect that is by keeping an eye on the ready state change. Eraser, maybe? Okay. Alrighty, I'm going to fail on drawing here. Okay, we'll do it this way. All right, even sorry about that. So what we're going to do here is in order to detect the fact that we got the data, the event that we want is on ready state changed, which basically just tells us that something has changed with our request object. And it's just that one event that we're going to get. So if we want to see that something has failed, if we want to see that a connection's been opened, if we want to see that it's been closed, etc., then we need to program all of that inside of here. So you're going to notice that inside of here, we're going to set up that anonymous function, which we learned earlier today, and we're then going to check the ready state. Now, if you check the documentation, you can find all the various ready states that are there. In this particular case, the one that we want is 4, which tells us that we got data back. So it's actually been completed. We got data back. And then you're going to notice right over here that we've got the status, and that's your standard everyday status code. If you've been doing web development for a while, you probably know that 200 means success. So it means that, hey, we've completed everything and everything worked. So we got some data back. Then from there, you're going to notice that we can go get the data, and we can actually get the header, we can get the full response object, and in this case, we can get the text that we're going to be retrieving here. I'm actually just going to use a very basic little text file down at the very bottom, or in my demo rather. So then you're going to notice that we've got all that. If we want to open up the connection, it's simply open. You pass the verb that you want, so if you want to use post or delete or otherwise, you can do that there. In our case, we're going to use get, and then specify the URL that we're looking to actually open. Now, where things I think get a little bit confusing is open doesn't do exactly what you would expect it to do. That what it actually does is it just simply opens up the connection to the server, but it doesn't actually send any data over, which can actually be a good thing because it gives you the opportunity to build up maybe some additional header information that needs to be sent up and control exactly how the data is going to be sent over to the server. The problem is when you're just trying to do something simple, you can very easily forget, oh yeah, that's right, I actually have to tell it to send the request up, and that's where send comes into play. So if we take a look back at my code, you'll notice down at the very bottom there, line 17, XHR send is how we're going to send it. One last little note before we get into the demo here. I'm going to try and draw again. We'll see what happens. And I'm going to fail again. If that's okay. Apparently it just doesn't like touch on me. But in any event, you'll notice that I used XHR there. That's sort of just a stock standard variable name that most people will use when they're using the XML HTTP request object. It's honestly the one that I always use, and I would definitely recommend if you are going to be doing that low level to do exactly that. Okay, so inside of my little demo here, I'm going to start off by just coding this by hand here. You are going to notice that I've got the HTML sort of already set up. I've got a little button here that you're going to click on to load up your data. And then I've got the output window there. And then what I want to do is I want to load up the contents of demo.txt, which of course is going to be hello world. This is a programming class. We are legally required to do hello world. So we're checking that box there. So we just want to get that to display inside of our output when we load the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magic of jQuery and add on load data, a click event handler function. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. And when we click on that, we want our XHR. So we'll say XHR equals new XML HTTP request, just like that. Then we'll go ahead and set up our event handler when we get data. That's going to be XHR. Scroll down. Make it a little easier. There we go. Dot ready state change. There we go. And we'll set that equal to a function. And inside of here, make sure we have data. And that's going to be if XHR, and then our ready state is 4, and XHR status equals 200. There we go. So again, 200 means success. 4 means that it actually completed and gave us some data back. So then I'm just going to simply say var data equals XHR, and then the response is what we actually want. You're going to notice that I could actually detect what the response is. You'll also notice that I've got the ability to get XML off of there, or we can just grab text. Now, one of the things that you could start to get into if you were getting really, really fancy here is you could actually use this to send JSON data. here we go. You could actually use XHR to send JSON data, which would actually allow you to lob an object from the server down to the client. And the way that you would read that is by using the response text. And then you would just simply need to convert that into a JSON object. There's actually a JSON helper to help you along with that. But better yet, use jQuery, which we'll talk about in just a couple of moments. In my case, though, it's just simply text. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm just going to simply say response text. There we go. And then let's go ahead and inside of our output, the O is silent there, text, and we'll put in the data. Cool. So now let's go ahead and open the connection. And that's going to be done by saying XHR, open, and then in my case, it's going to be get. And then the URL is going to be demo.txt. I'm very creative in my naming there, as you can tell. And then let's actually send the signal. Send the request. And XHR, send. Beautiful. OK, so now let me go ahead and open this up. Chugga, chugga, chugga. And I've got my little load data. Let me click on that. And sure enough, it prints out hello world. And it's doing that by actually calling out to the server, which I think anyway is kind of cool. All right. So that's how we could, just really down to the most basic of level, start calling out to the server. But if you're anything like me, and I know I am, you probably don't want to have to worry about, OK, well, what's the status and calling send and setting all of that up. It'd be kind of nice just to be able to say, hey, you know what? There's some data there. Just go get that data and give it back to me. Well, fortunately, this is where Ajax and jQuery come into play. So first up, let's go ahead and define Ajax. So Ajax basically stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now, the reason that I'm sort of taking my time with that sentence is because that's sort of kind of what it stands for. But it doesn't necessarily actually have to do anything with all of that. Yes, it's going to be asynchronous. Yes, there's going to be JavaScript. But ironically enough, these days, there's very little XML that typically, rather than sending XML data back and forth, you'll send JSON data, JavaScript object notation, you'll send JSON data back and forth instead. So really, Ajax just simply means Ajax. And it's just a set of commonly used technologies to simplify those calls. So rather than having to use the request object directly, you can just use the little helper functions that jQuery provides. So jQuery, and there are other libraries as well, help simplify those calls. Now, it does still use the XML HTTP request object behind the scenes, because that's still the only way that the browser is going to be able to call out to the server. But you're going to notice that it makes it just that much easier. So if I just want to go get text, it's just simply .get, and well, that's it. And if I want to go get JSON, then it's just simply $.getJSON. And that's it. So it becomes much easier for me to use that rather than using the XML HTTP request object.
Before you get into your jQuery, can I just, I guess, relay some questions?
Yeah.
So the first question is the request method, like get or post, case sensitive?
So yes. Here's I have a thing when it comes to case sensitivity is I just treat everything like it's case sensitive, just because that helps me avoid potential issues. The standard is whenever you're using the verb names to use all capital letters. So I use all capital letters all the time, and in turn it always works. So I really don't know the answer to whether or not it's case sensitive because I've never tried it in lowercase letters. So what I would say is just use uppercase letters.
I was definitely thinking, I was like, I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The next question is, if I have a server-side address that returns data upon HTTP GET method, can I just get it from the URL, or does it need to be a file?
No, you could absolutely get it from the URL. So if you're going to be calling, I kept it really simple and just used a text file. But if you were calling PHP or Node or MVC and it was going to be sending down text, you could do that as well. So it doesn't have to be just a static text file. In this little example, because I'm using response text, we need to get text back. But how that text is generated on the server is completely up to the server.
Okay, and then the last question is, can calls be synchronous or it has to be asynchronous?
They can be synchronous, but I don't suggest that they be synchronous. The reason for that is you get one thread by default, and if you're waiting for the server, waiting for the server, waiting for the server, it's just going to make your page appear slower. So I do recommend doing it asynchronously, and that is the default. Okay, cool. So let's actually just go back to our little page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out this entire block here, just leave that behind. And I'm just going to start this all over again, just by simply saying pound load data, click, and my function. OK, beautiful. So now I'm going to do everything, but this time I'm going to do it with jQuery. So I'm going to say $.get, and that will give us our text back. And then it's going to say, all right, well, we need to know the server that you're looking to connect up to. What is it that you want to call? And so again, it's going to be demo.txt. Now I don't need to specify the verb because it's automatically going to be get. And I also don't need to specify what the data type is because get is only going to get me text data. Now, this is built on jQuery. And one of the things that we saw in the last module was this cool little thing called promises. And one thing that you'll notice about jQuery is that anything at all that's going to take a little while, like calling a server, returns a promise. So just right in line here, I can just simply say done. And then I could go in and say function, and then just get the data directly right from there. There we go. And so inside of here, the data from the server is inside of the variable data. The call is coming from inside the house. So there it is. So now all I have to do is to simply $pound output text, and let's add in our data. So we'll go in, we'll hit save, we'll come back over here to the browser, little control F5, we'll hit load data, and sure enough, we get hello world again. And just to kind of prove that it is in fact doing its thing, I'm just going to close the browser, reopen it, and I'm going to hit load data again. And sure enough, you're going to notice that it gives me hello world. So for those of you that are scoring at home, you're going to notice that being able to load the data, save for comments, took 3 lines of code, essentially. I'm not going to count the 2 closings down at the very bottom. You compare that with the XML HTTP request, and that took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, which is obviously a lot more and a little bit more complex. So definitely just take advantage of jQuery there. It's going to make your life that much easier. Cool. All right. Now, from there, we've seen how we can call the server. And that's cool. But how about the server calling the client? That let's say, for example, that I wanted to create the next great social networking site. I really don't, but let's just say that I do. Well, if we're going to create a social networking site, what's going to wind up happening is all these different people are going to be commenting on all these different things, and I want to be able to see that on my feed all live. Well, I don't want to just be constantly refreshing the browser or put in JavaScript to constantly be refreshing and going, hey, do you have any data? Hey, do you have any data? I'd really like the ability for the server just to send a message on down to the client. Now, there's a couple of different technologies that are available to do this, but the main one that we want to focus in on here is WebSockets. Now, the reason that I'm focusing in on WebSockets is because it is a standard that it was put together by the W3C, and it is part of HTML5. So while several do exist, WebSockets is sort of the stock standard one that we're going to do. So if we are going to create that truly interactive site, the server needs to be able to call the client, and that's done by utilizing WebSockets. Now, the good part about using WebSockets is that it's actually both very similar to using the workers that we saw earlier and very similar to doing normal socket development. So that the client can absolutely call up to the server, and the server can absolutely call down to the client. And you're also going to notice that it uses that basic little messaging system, that there's going to be an on message when the server sends something on down. And when we want to send something up, the name of the method is going to be send instead of post message to send something up to the server. And so as a result, it makes it kind of simple for me to go in and do whatever it is that I want. So you're going to notice that I have, and I'm going to, for some reason, it just keeps wanting to zoom in whenever I hit Control 2. That's all right. So what you're going to notice is I have right there my little var socket equals new WebSocket, and then specify the URL. More on that when I get into my demo. And then you're going to notice that we've got our on message. So that's going to tell us, hey, we got a message back. And then also, just like we saw in our worker, it's going to actually be an event args object where we'll actually have some data. So I'll retrieve that data off of e.data. And then you'll also notice that when I want to send something up, it's going to be simply call send. Now, here's one little catch, which is that the socket can take a few seconds for it to open. There's an on-open event that we're going to want to catch to make sure that everything is all set and ready for us to go. So on-open will tell us that it's actually opened up, and we're able to actually do our work, start sending messages. OK. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our little demo for our WebSockets.
Question.
Yes,
question,
you have your hand raised.
We have a few. I just don't want to interrupt you again.
You can interrupt me. It's really fine.
So we have about 3 questions. So the first question is, since we can't use jQuery and web workers, are we restricted to XML HTTP requests when working within a worker script?
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to use jQuery. I honestly need to double check to see if the XML HTTP request can work inside of a web worker. I want to say that the answer to that question, interestingly, is no. However, one big thing to keep in mind is the reason that I would use a web worker is because I'd want asynchronous. The request object supports asynchronous automatically, so it sort of, I don't want to say eliminates the need, but it lessens the need to actually put that inside of a web worker. I want to say that it doesn't work, but I'd honestly have to double check that, which I'll do at break and confirm. Although something tells me somebody else that's watching knows the answer to that, but I want to say the answer to that is no.
So okay, so the WebSockets are based on jQuery, or
no, the WebSocket is actually an HTML5 object, so that's not a jQuery thing.
Okay, and then next question: are the various ready states returned available in the jQuery approach?
Yes, so that there actually is a raw Ajax helper. So you can actually do $.ajax, which will give you access to almost everything that you would want from behind the scenes. Most people use the basic helper methods just because that's going to give you what you need 98.63294% of the time. But for that last little remaining one and change, you could use either the $.ajax, which will give you a lot more control and get you a lot closer to that XML HTTP request object. But I would say that if you really need to get down to that level, just go ahead and get down to that level and just start using the request object.
Okay, and last question.
Yeah.
If a service could return status 202 as well as 200, would .get with .done still work?
So if it returns back a 202, which would still mean success, .done would work because .done is going to indicate success. I would also mention that if you did get a 400 or a 500 back, that the .failure would work. So what winds up happening behind the scenes is when you use the AJAX helper method, jQuery is going to be using the XML HTTP request object behind the scenes and wrapping that, if you will, with the deferred that we saw earlier. So that approach that we took with the web workers, jQuery is doing that exact same thing, but it's just doing that with the XML HTTP request object. So it's going to detect the 200, and if it's a 200, then it's just simply going to give us back a success, which we would capture in done. But when I go in to actually read the data, it's just not going to give me anything if it's a 202. It's just simply success, no data. At least if I remember right, 202 is success, no data. If it turned out that it gave us a 400 or a 500, then it would actually raise failure, and then I could go in and grab the data inside of there. And I would also mention, to go one step further, we're starting to get a little bit away from the main course here, is inside of that failure, and also inside of the done as well, but inside of that failure, you can actually go get whatever that raw request object was, and by that I mean the AJAX request object, and actually see what the full status was, and if there was an error message that was sent back, you could actually see what that error message is as well.
Awesome, that's it.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's see, where were we? Oh yeah, sockets, cool. So here's what I'm gonna do, is I'm going to open up my server side first, which I put right here. Okay, so in order to use sockets, because sockets are two-way communication, the server is gonna send something down to the client is gonna send something back to the server, two-way communication, the server needs to support sockets. Most every web server these days supports WebSockets. This is the ASP.NET implementation. Node supports this, PHP supports this. When I do server-side development, I'm an MVC and sometimes Python kind of guy, and so that's why I did this with C#. But in any event, what you're going to notice, the basic way that this works, is that when a connection comes in, it's going to actually call start to handle the connection. We're going to wait until we actually receive a message. When we do, I'm then going to call my little process. On the receive, what you're going to notice is, and I'm not going to get real deep into the code, but what I want you to notice on it is we're getting really right down into the stream itself. That if you've ever done stream work inside of .NET, you know that you go get a block of characters, then you get the next block of characters, and then you get the next block of characters. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we're just grabbing a block and grabbing another block and grabbing another block. So you're going to notice we get really just right down to that really low level stream. So we get the message, and then on the process, all that I'm doing is two things, is that I'm adding on that little process. That's going to be my basic echo. I'm going to send it down, and then I'm going to simulate the server sending a message to the client by sleeping for, and I'm going to make this 5 seconds, by sleeping for 5 seconds, and then just simply sending another message down. And then on the send, what you're going to notice is I need to convert this into a byte array, and then I call send async to send that on down. So the main thing here from all of the .NET code, don't worry about memorizing all of this. I'm actually going to show you an easier way. But the main thing that I want you to notice is that we're really getting down to just like we were doing normal network socket development. It's a very low level here that we're getting into. Okay, now from the client then, we want this. I want, where did I put it? Okay, socket AS, okay. I want to go here. So let's try to do this with sockets. So let me comment that, and this was jQuery Ajax. This was the XML HTTP request. Now we're going to use WebSockets. WebSockets. OK, so once again, when you go ahead and click on the button, so in our case, it's going to be load data, click, we're going to, for starters, set up our WebSocket. So var socket equals new WebSocket. And now it's going to look for a URL here. One very interesting thing about WebSockets is that this actually doesn't use HTTP. It uses the WebSocket protocol, which is actually a good thing because if you know anything about HTTP, you probably know that it's just this big, heavy protocol, that there's just an awful lot to it, it's relatively slow, and it's really not designed for two-way communication. This is where the WebSocket protocol comes into play. So when you make the call, you actually need to use WS inside of your URL. So you'll notice that unlike before, where I was just simply saying // which would use HTTP, I explicitly have to state WS : and then the location. And in my case, it's socket ASHX, which is actually what's going to serve up that C# code that we took a look at before. Then I can go ahead and say on message, and we'll go ahead and say function, and this is going to give me my data. And every time we get a message, we'll just simply append that in. What did I call that? Output. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change this actually, I'm going to do it this way. UL ID equals output list, just to keep it separate. There we go. Output list. Append li plus e.data, that's going to give me my data, plus, and then close out our li. And while I'm doing this, it's worth mentioning that we could have used a JSON object or something like that. That would have actually worked just fine. So, but in our case, we're just doing this. And then once it's ready, so we'll go ahead and say socket, and then on open. So now we know that it's actually ready. We'll actually send up our data. So let's just go ahead and say socket send, and my data, which I'm going to pull from the message text box. OK, and val. Yo.
All right, 2 questions really quickly.
Yep.
So
Question one.
There is a load event on the XHR. What is the difference between onLoad and onReady stage change?
So onLoad, if I remember right, is just going to execute when it's loaded up the object itself. I don't believe that that's going to be when the data actually comes back. You do want to use that onReady state when the data comes back.
And then the last question is, so this is the case where the actual response is not a file per se, but a result of the server-side operation. So I think that has to do...
Exactly. Yeah, although, you know, really in both cases, it would be the result of a server-side operation. You know, I just used a text file, but as we talked about before, I could have just as easily called, you know, something running PHP or Node.
OK. And last pop-in question, just popped in. Can we receive audio files from WebSocket requests?
Yes? Question mark? I want to say that you can. The one little trick, though, is I want to say that there's a different serialization that you need to use, that you just have to simply tell it that you're going to be sending down binary data. But I want to say that you can send down binary data using it this way. I want to say the answer to that is yes. So don't quote me on that, but I want to say the answer is yes. OK. Cool. All right, so there is everything. I think I've got it all. I'm going to send my message up. OK. I'll give this a 7% chance of working. Oh, that's funny. You know what I forgot to add in? A text box. All right, talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor a revolution. Discuss.
What?
Message. There we go. And input type equals text, class equals form control, and ID equals message. Okay, there we go. Try that again. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this with a silent X, and then hit load data. And second message there. Okay, so here's what happened. What happened was, and let's just kind of refresh the page and actually just do it again. I think this is so cool. So what's happening here is I'm going to send the message up, and it comes back, tells me it was processed, and then the server is actually going to send me another message. So you're going to notice here that inside of my code, I didn't actually make a request to the server to say, hey, server, give me data. I sent data up to the server, and then I said, hey, when the server sends me data, I want you to do something. So that second message that's coming down is not because I went back to the server and said, hey, give me data. It's because the server sent me data. We had an event based on that, and we retrieved it that way. I think that's cool. All right. Cool. Any other questions to there?
No.
Okay, I like it. Beautiful.
Someone likes your watch.
Thank you. It's my Garmin.
Oh, wait, we just got a question.
Yo.
How would you change what port the WebSockets use? Port 80 versus port 443?
Oh, great question. So, so the question is about WebSockets and ports. You're going to notice in my case that my WebSocket used 49439, and the reason for that is because I'm using IIS Express, which just randomly comes up with a port number. So that's why it's using this. By default, WebSockets is going to use either 80, or if you want 443, it's going to be WSS. So WS, WebSocket, port 80, WSS is going to be 443. So it actually uses the exact same port number, but it is a different protocol. And just like HTTP versus HTTPS, the way that you change is just by simply adding on the S. So WS, 80, unsecure, WSS, going to use SSL, going to use 443.
Okay, and the last question, is there a general rule to know when the function will return data directly or e.data?
So it really, unfortunately, depends. So the question is, e.data or just the data directly. It really depends on whatever it is that's being raised. So unfortunately, in that case, it's check the documentation because it's going to vary. In the case of the web worker, in the case of the WebSocket, it's going to be off of the data property. In other places, it's just going to be the data directly. It really just sort of depends.
That's all in this episode. I hope this tutorial was helpful. In the next episode, we will cover the remaining part of server communications, JavaScript libraries, and also have a look at the new course that will be starting. Is your mind ringing with questions, queries, or doubts? Do you wish to learn more? Then visit our website www.millionlights.org and post your questions on our forum. We will be really happy to clear all your doubts. If you missed anything and want to rewatch it, you can download it from our website or can watch online as well. You can also participate in our webinars, discussions with the subject experts, as well as get Microsoft certification on various courses through our website. You can also find us on Facebook by the name Millionlights and also on Twitter. For more such interesting tutorials on coding, app development, and building rich UIs, keep watching Microsoft Hour of Code, brought to you by Millionlights. Thank you.